Hello, David, and welcome to Hands in the Soil podcast. I'm excited to have you back here. We had you on the podcast almost 2 years ago now, and I know that you've been on such a journey with the Cardiff Tiny Farm and the way that you've really transformed this business and grown, I think probably personally and professionally through so much with that space. So I'm excited to dive into some of that today and have you back on the podcast. How are you?
Oh, well, yeah, it's super fun to be back. It's awesome to see where you've taken the podcast in 2 years. You've taken it so far, and yeah, there are a lot has happened in those 2 years that we've obviously been keeping connected. But I feel a whole lot of gratitude for the things that have fallen in place so perfectly to lead us to where we are today. And there's aspirations and dreams of where we're going to go, but the future is very uncertain, as you know, because this place is so um, time constrained, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. But before we get there, I know in the last episode you gave us more of an in-depth overview of kind of your journey into agriculture and what kind of brought you here and brought you to this space. So could you just give us another, maybe brief, maybe expanded, whatever kind of wherever it takes you, but a little bit of a history into how you got into agriculture and how you got into farming?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because most people who come to our farm stand think I've been doing this for forever, and they think that I was raised with gardens and farming. And though that's a little true, it's not entirely true. My dad's from Iowa, so we have farming lineage. My great grandfather was a farmer in Minnesota. However, he passed away in a farming accident in his early 30s, which sent my grandpa to the farm and his sisters, more north in Rochester. Later on, my grandpa found his way in Des Moines. He became an insurance salesman. My dad went into sales, and farming kind of left our lineage for a time being. However, we've always visited Iowa. We have our family reunions in Minnesota around where our grandfather's farm was. So it's in our blood. It just, we kind of distanced ourselves from it for a while. And it's quite interesting to see both my sister and myself coming back to it in the last, I would say, 8 years or so. Didn't start off farming. I was actually in a different industry entirely. I was in tech, fascinated by all the crazy things that were happening in that space in the 2014 era when I graduated college. I didn't have many skills or I didn't have direction, but I had a lot of ambition. And that's kind of seemingly the place that people flock to if you had ambition, but felt a little bit aimless. So got picked up by a company in tech, stayed with them for about 10 years and did the software thing, really fell in love with software, really fell in love with analytics, data science, all these kind of abstract thinking sort of occupations. And, still very much have that side of me. But in the later part of that tenure in tech, gardening became this saving grace. It was kind of the space I retreated to and got familiar with and became acquainted with in efforts to, I guess, regain part of my soul back. I just kind of felt like I was getting distant from the world, distant from things that felt real and tangible. I was living in the life of bits and bytes and numbers and stuff like that. So gardening came calling, and it just snowballed from there. We took a permaculture class, wanting to know more about sustainable living design systems, and that introduced new ideas and concepts to me and my sister. And then we doubled down on gardening. We wanted to learn how to grow food at bigger scale. So we started volunteering at farms. That volunteering turned into more than volunteering, but less than an internship at various farms, most, notably Farm Lab, which is where Kat, who you work closely with and who you've interviewed in the past, saw us in our initial stages, both Kendra and I, in our initial stages of wanting to learn how to grow food. And then it eventually graduated to where I found the Cardiff Tiny Farm, and that was when Greg was running it. And kind of just immediately fell in love with the space. Came across it, came here to volunteer one day. Kind of one of those surreal, you see someone from across the train tracks and you just know immediately that they're your soulmate. This place had that moment where I was like, there's something that I want to give myself to here. I had no idea what it was going to turn into, but I just followed Greg wherever I could. He was super inviting and welcoming and generous with his time. And I just wanted to learn from him. I wanted to be around here. And The rest of the story goes, Greg became the full-time farmer at Fox Point. So when he left here, it was a little bit undecided if this farm was going to continue forward or not. I had this real calling to keep it alive. And that was in 2024 when you first interviewed me. And we've been doing that ever since. So that's kind of the long and short of it, I guess.
That's so funny that when we had our last interview, it was like just at the beginning of kind of that transition.
Uh-huh.
And it's been really cool to see from afar just the ways in which, like, the directions that you've taken the space and what you've learned in real time and kind of applied to how you then take steps following that. And I want to talk more about that because I feel like there's a significance in the journey you've had in relation to farming and agriculture and taking a space that is so small that I think a lot of people might not give enough credit to say like, oh, wow, you can really make something of this, or like, you know, you can really grow food and feed a lot of people on, it's what, like a tenth of an acre.
Yeah.
So for people to be able to witness that, I think is really incredible. I think it's often mind blowing for a lot of people too. I feel like people just often think of like how you need more space and you know, you need something so big in order to provide for a community, but really you don't. And it also speaks to the ways in which, you know, Greg, I feel like spoke to this a lot and you've carried this forward, but what if we could have 1,000 tiny farms? You know, if we have a tiny farm in every community base or every neighborhood, and you have this like local space for people to have access to and be a part of and source their food from, and also like have this really beautiful connection to community.
Uh-huh.
So can you just talk about that a little bit of like what has been some of the journey with the vision that you've had for the space, or maybe what you didn't know it was going to turn into and kind of where it's ended up being, and just speak to that part, because there's so many people that have been a part of this space that I think have really helped make it what it is. But I would also attribute that to you because you really bring people in a great way. So yeah, can you just talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to frame it. The first intention coming into the space was, how do I honor all of the work and the commitment and the love that's been put in here and poured in here before me? How do I honor that first and keep that front and center while trying to make it into something that can support myself, you know, and possibly turn into something larger and, you know, a real business at some point. So that was first aim. And that set in motion, I think, a lot of the behaviors that instructed me going forward. It was always around community. It was always around inviting people and making this place and a space where people wanted to gather and giving back in that same vein. And then the bet being, if I did that in earnest, and that's like the critical part. If you do that with absolute sincerity, not as an ulterior motive to profit, if you commit yourself and give yourself to a space, if you make it as beautiful and inviting as possible, if you do as much as you can to make it thriving and productive, there's a business there. It just happens. People want to come see you. People want to come see the space. People want to come give their talents to the things you're doing. People want to come spend their money there. But it's a fine line, you know, because we've seen it. I mean, we have a term for it, greenwashing. It's a fine line between setting the intention to do something good and having that be the marketing pitch for the business. So it's like, where's the arrow pointing in terms of what's serving what? That is kind of like the core that I kind of have to always check myself, because as we try to grow the business, it's easy to let the growth get in the way of the heart. And if something's not really aligned with the spirit of what this place started out to be, I can feel it pretty quickly. And I have to kind of, it's indication for me to reassess and go forward in a different way. But yeah, that would be the intention I set out to do. It was really meager to start out with. I think our first year we did maybe 20,000 in sales. And that was just everything we produced here on the farm. So I pretty much relied entirely on what we can grow here. And that was a mixed array of seasonal veggies and like year-round salad greens. root crops, all that. We had our farm stand or our CSA. Those were our two primary outlets. We did have a couple wholesale accounts at the start, but they kind of fizzled out towards the middle and the end of the year. So I was really relying on anything I could grow. And I found that to be a pretty hard go, especially at as small of an acreage that we're working on. The space we rent itself from an aerial view is about a third of an acre, but the production growing spaces are a third of that. So it is about a tenth of an acre. And I didn't know right away that we needed to go a different direction, but things just started to surface. Like I got introduced to Food Shed, and Food Shed then allowed me to buy some wholesale items. You know, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but at times I couldn't service all of the CSA boxes. We had 6 CSA boxes maybe every week starting out. And there's times I didn't have enough on the farm to service those 6 CSA boxes, especially with some of the variety that I wanted. So I'd literally be going to the farmer's market and buying things at a retail value to like put into the boxes so that there was variety, because I didn't have any wholesale relationships. Only to then be introduced to Food Shed, I'm like, wow, okay, now I have some wholesale opportunities. I can really dial up our CSA. I can really dial up our farm stand. I can really offer the variety and the local nature of products and goods that I've wanted that I can't grow here. And I did that, but it did entail me stepping up a little bit in terms of spending. So I had to spend more to make more, as they say. But the input was, you know, it was worth it. I'd put, you know, $1 in, I get $1.50 out or something. I put $1 in, I get $1.25 out, you know, as the whole breakdown goes. So that second year we grew considerably. So I wanted to make 2025 like a real case study, and I did a lot. And I was working at Fox Point at the time as a part-time farmer because that was helping support my life. But I tried to document as much as I could in that 2025 year, thinking that it was going to be our last year on the farm. And we ended up making $70,000 that year, and profit was about $20K. So, you know, almost 3x our sales, and almost, I would say, 3 to 4x our profit in that process. But it required me spending a considerable amount more. Just doing the math there, I probably spent $50,000 on a lot of different things, you know, wholesale items in particular, but we elevated our CSA box program a bit. I bought new materials to, you know, kind of facilitate that upgrade. We invested in an event space, so we kind of put a lot there. And anyway, that's just kind of how it's been ratcheting up, but it's always with this sense of what feels right and what feels aligned to making this place a gathering spot and a place that people want to be and people want to support.
Yeah, and I think something that you started doing maybe last year was you called it farming in public, and you would like publicly walk through your numbers and what each week looked like and how it changed and what affected what. And I think that was also something really unique that most people don't get to see. Most people don't really understand. I don't think you've done them this year.
No,
maybe.
yeah, I got to get back on the track there. I had, going into this year, I wanted to really upgrade our systems because a lot of the stuff I was doing was just manual upkeep in an Excel spreadsheet. And I love Excel spreadsheets. I actually am trying to find ways to utilize them in a more sophisticated manner because I think they're just universally accessible. But that Excel spreadsheet that I was keeping a lot of the accounting on last year just became this web of mess. And I've been meaning to make that a little bit more streamlined, but other things have taken priority this year. So I got to get back to it. The farming in public was a fun project. I started it because, like, as you said, I wanted people to know the ground truth of what it takes to grow some food we're doing and to like bring the community forward the way we were wanting to, and just kind of the brass tacks of all that. And it was nice for me to understand every week, okay, I got to make this much to break even. Like, our rent breaks down to this amount every month or every week. Our water breaks down to this much every week, give or take. Our electricity, this much. And those are just like sunk costs. So how do I make that back up? The theme of 2025 was just going fast. Like 2024 was get familiar with the space, learn, listen, just invest time and energy into building a relationship here. And then 2025, especially with the thought that it was going to be our last year here, I'm like, go as fast and as hard as you can so that we can make the case that these things are actually financially viable. So I said yes to everything, and I did as many things as I could. And again, all while having a part-time gig, about 25-ish hour a week gig at Fox Point, as just like a farmhand. And I was so beat. I was so tired at the end of the year, and I couldn't fathom doing that all over again this year. So I've refined a lot of things. But in 2025, I was really excited to tell that story and to show like, hey, these things, you can make money. Like I think for the first year, people thought it was kind of like a cute venture and a hobby, and kind of served that for a little bit, just in terms of the bottom line. And then 2025 was like, this is much more than, this is like kind of a livelihood, and this is a serious thing, and this is something I'm really trying to make into something real and formidable, I guess. The farming public things are cool. I definitely intend to bring those back. I intend to kind of make it part of our website where there's a continual like tracker where I'm not having to do as much manual data entry. It just kind of feeds in from all of our systems, and people can see like, hey, this is the overhead cost for the week. This is the wholesale cost of goods sold. It required me to learn a lot more about accounting or refresh my understanding of accounting. It was fun for folks, I think, to see like, oh, okay, like that was brutal. It was a brutal week. I felt like I worked 1,000 hours and we lost $100. That's just how it goes too. I now walk into any business and I am 10 times more appreciative of the service that's being rendered or the product I'm purchasing, because I understand the $20 I'm giving them or the $5 I'm giving them, that just gets eviscerated in terms of costs. And they're probably walking away with 75 cents or $1 on that $5 if they're doing good. Like a 20% margin's not bad. But people only think about top line. I only thought about top line when I was like starting out. I did all the mental math in my head around like, okay, if we did this much wholesale, we did this, that's $50,000. And yeah, I mean, that's part of the story, but that's not the whole story. I think thinking that way is like important for farmers, like being a little bit more business minded. Of course, we're doing this thing from our heart. No one goes into farming necessarily to become a billionaire, but we also don't need to succumb to the idea that we're just going to be starving artists a whole life either. I think we're doing something of value. We're doing something of extraordinary value, and we can expect to have some value be given back in return. There can be a better energy transfer, if you will. And I think it's going that direction just with the thinking behind food and where people want to source their food. So I don't know if I'm the person to say it's time that farmers start thinking about a little bit more of the strategic, financial, business ideas around farming, but maybe I'm like one of many voices to contribute a little, a little piece of insight into that idea.
Yeah. So do you feel like you're approaching that aspect of having a farm and keeping the intention and the value and the integrity there, and also looking at the numbers and recognizing this is a business? Like, do you feel like you kind of meet those two sides more easily now, or do you approach that in a different way?
I think so. I would have to be honest, like my upkeep with the numbers at the moment isn't, my financial hygiene, I should say, is not nearly as good as it was last year, where like every week it would be just set in stone. I can't start the next market until I close out that week's books. So it's a little on me to get back into that habit and to have a little bit more ability to say, yes, I know I'm hitting that mark. I would say we're hitting a good balance in terms of, I know who we are now. I know what I can do, and I know what I can do in a sustainable way. And I know what this space can afford in terms of production and experiences. And I think we've reached a pretty decent balancing point there. There's some weeks where I'm thinking, okay, I did a little bit too much. And there's other weeks where I'm like, okay, I didn't really utilize the week as best I could. I probably came out a little bit in the red there. So I guess in a hand wavy, energetically, I feel like we're hitting a balance. I could do this for a long while, assuming we have the space for longer than it's probably going to be the case. But I can't give like a numerical, like exact confirmation there. I do think that there's better systems behind us to where we can administer the things we've gotten really good at doing, the events, the CSA boxes, the farm stands, stuff like that, I don't stress out nearly as much. I'm
That's
able to
good.
do more too. It's like there's more capacity to put more into content, put more into the storytelling,
Mm.
put more into like some of the things that I think we can bring forward once this farm kind of has to find a new location.
Mm-hmm.
That has been huge. Because for a while I felt like a hamster on a wheel in 2025. Like I can't stop. If I stop, this thing loses momentum. And now I think I can step off the wheel and that thing's spinning a little bit. And then I got to hop back on, like keep running on the wheel.
Yeah. 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 Is there anything that you would want people to know that they don't know about the realm of farming or being a farmer or being a small farmer? Is there anything that you experience where you're like, man, if people just knew, or I wish they understood this, or I wish there was something that translated in an easier way between, that side of producer and consumer or anything like
Yeah.
that?
Maybe at the risk of sounding a bit preachy, I would just want to share how important it's been for me to localize the food that I choose to consume. Like, I don't think there's enough statistics, studies, or anything of a scientific basis out there that drives home just how important I feel eating local food is. Like, it has dramatically changed the way I show up in the world. It's dramatically changed my relationship to this place in San Diego that I call home. I know what is in season. I know what grows. I know what sort of like exotic fruits are available in this unique region alone in certain areas and time frames. I know when I go to a grocery store, when I see things, I'm like, that's probably abroad, or that's probably produced overseas. That's probably produced in a hothouse. That's probably produced. You kind of just get X-ray vision when you go into a grocery store anymore because you have a relationship with nature and what it offers. And then just nutritionally, it just feels something awakens inside you, and you feel like you want to contribute something of value to the world. It almost is like you can't accept doing nonsense anymore. I mean, it's not to say I live this really rigid lifestyle where everything has to be productive all the time. It's just like you can feel what your intuition and what your heart's telling you to go, and it becomes so loud at some point that you just know exactly what it is you need to do. It's a part of that. It's not like you're going to eat a local organic apple tomorrow and all of a sudden, your problems are going to be solved. But there's going to be a connection that you feel that I can't express enough how meaningful it's been for me. That's why I've given myself to actually growing that kind of food. It's not that I expect everyone to be a small farmer after they, buy a CSA box for a few months. But supporting small farms, advocating for them, being a little bit more of a conscious consumer when it comes to things you feed yourself and your family, that has a ripple effect in terms of how much more will be available because farmers choose to enter the space because it's economically viable at that point. So it's servicing you, your body, your mind, your spirit. It's servicing the larger kind of food system at large, where we'll see farmers choosing to enter the space or choosing to flip their practices of growing to something that is more consumer friendly at that point. And then we kind of just see the social, political, global change. I believe that is a downstream effect of that one small choice you get to make 3 times a day, which is like, what food am I going to put in my mouth?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the thing I'd want to drive home the most.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. I agree. And you'd mentioned how you don't really have security on this land that you're on, right? You're
Yeah.
renting the space, and this might be the last year, right? Is
Yeah,
that still unknown, or?
We're on borrowed time for sure. I think everyone that I know who supports us here is getting tired of me saying like, it's close, but it's close. It's like our landlord, property owner, he's been super gracious with allowing us to continue this operation as he's been finding his way through the permitting process to ultimately put a couple homes on here. No shade on him for doing that. It is very valuable property. I mean, North County, San Diego coastal property is not cheap, and it's a blessing that we get to do this for the time period we've been able to. I thought we were going to maybe have a year. To have 2025 was just cherry on top, and likely to have the whole year of 2026 if I had to make my estimates. It's just an unreal privilege. So yeah, it's there's an expiration date here. It's kind of reflective in a little bit of the changes that I've made to the business, because I don't want to do too much more investment in the space, knowing that it's going to be soon, needing to be relocated.
How are you approaching that, kind of knowing that there's an end date? And I mean, do you have a plan, or yeah, what are you hoping for moving forward with kind of that unknown?
So the intention going into this year is, okay, this is likely the last year, as I mentioned. We have a lot of infrastructure already existing here on site. How can we utilize it and responsibly? We're in a residential space, so we can't blow the lid off of having an event every night. I don't want to do that. Those things are actually really hard to host, pretty taxing, but they're an absolute joy to see people gathering around. So it's like, let's use our event space while we have it, while we have this physical location. Let's build the brand of the Cardiff Tiny Farm. Let's build the following. So I put a lot into content creation, social media. I've been trying to do like a YouTube channel. You and I have been kind of collaborating on setting up some talks here, like live in-person interviews, and building a little bit of a content stream that is aligned and is in efforts to grow the following that we have made here. I've dramatically reduced the crop plan so that it allows me to have more time to do some of the content. So our crop plan used to involve a whole host of different crops, specifically ones that required seeding and transplanting. I've totally cut out transplanting into our crop plan. We're now direct seeded, cut salad green operation, and we threw in a couple flowers, just as like a little bit of an experiment of my own. I would love to learn more of how to grow flowers and maybe just a few select varieties that might sell at our market. And then really, I've been trying to build out our CSA program, because the way I see it right now, it's something that I feel I can continue delivering on despite not having a farm here in the near 9 to 10 months or so. And that is just through sourcing from other farms. Like, I'd love to continue that and be a source of local organic food for the community that we're already serving in the interim as we go shop around for new spaces. And I'd love to grow that. Like, I have a really bold ambition that I want to serve 100 families a week through our CSA box. We have the systems now designed to allow for that. I have the wholesale relationships designed to allow for that. Our crop plan, after it kind of like it's now fully flipped into a salad green production operation, I should be allowed to provide all the salad greens for those CSA boxes on a either bi-weekly or weekly basis. So I'm really like it took a lot of shifting on the operation side to get that squared away, but we're there. So now it's marketing, business kind of aspects, business operations aspects to get it to the 100 mark. And then it's kind of making the decision on where to go next. I like being a small producer, and I like growing at the scale that we're growing now, at like a tenth to maybe a quarter of an acre. And I like doing the salad greens sort of stuff. So if I can produce the salad greens that go into our CSA boxes, and if I can grow that CSA box member base, I would love to have that be the mainstay of what the Cardiff Tiny Farm becomes. Of course, I don't know if we'll be able to do that in Cardiff, so whether the Cardiff aspect of Cardiff Tiny Farms remains, we'll see. But that's where my head's at currently. The CSA boxes seem to be the biggest driver of continuing the legacy of this space, and I really have fallen in love with figuring out how to make those boxes more than just a transaction of produce being delivered to a household. We put a lot of time into crafting inserts for those boxes that are educational, that tie back into our website, that tell more of a story of local food and local farms that these items are coming from. I love including a little fact about farms and farming and seasonality, and then anything that kind of inspires action and folks to go, support more farms in their time. That's kind of where I see those boxes being a great package. It's like, here's your package of food and here's your package of stories to go along with it. That's what I'd love to see it become. So that's where my head's at the moment. And again, we're kind of not told exactly when, because the permitting process by the city is such a uncertain deal itself. We're on a 60-day vacate premises agreement. So, I mean, we could get a note today and it says like 60 days, you're gone. So I'm really working hard at any given moment, either keeping the operation alive that we currently have or trying to build the bridge to that unknown future that we have to get ready to leap forward towards. And that kind of runs me crazy sometimes.
I can see that.
But people coming to the farm stand on Saturdays, and people picking up their boxes on Wednesdays, and the people that just wander back here because I invite people to do so. That resets my gears and reminds me like this is all about people first. So business stuff, as I mentioned, will take care of itself if there's enough sincerity poured into the purpose behind what we're doing here. And that is a big trust fall. That could be, I think what makes it so exciting and real and scary is that could be a totally false premise, but it's a premise that I'm choosing to operate against. I came from college studying business. Business told me that, everyone's out to pursue their own self-interest. And in doing so, there's a collaborative, collective organization that, we see working around us. But I think it's gotten its little shadow side is starting to express itself, and our self-interest has kind of kept us insular and disconnected. And I'm like, what if we reinvited connection back into the space of business? What if we chose to not try to take everything, but just give as much as we can and ask for a little bit more in return? Like, does that play in the long run to something vibrant, beautiful, and sustainable? And I'm totally okay with people laughing at that, saying like, dude, pipe dream, good luck. It's still something I'm willing to bet on. And every farm stand we set up, every event we do, every CSA box delivery that I make is that silent cry out like, hey, this is what I believe in. This is what we're going towards.
Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful that you're doing that because I think so many of us are learning through your experience too. So
it's a community, all of us, we like rely on each other so much. There's some days like we're just in it and we're going through it and we don't know when we're going to get out of this like fog of overwhelm. And it's a simple conversation, a simple kind of reminder of like, hey, you're doing good work. Like, hey, keep up with this. Hey, like this is how I would approach this problem that you're experiencing. Hey, do you want to sell some of this? I have some excess. Like that is the dream kind of becoming reality in real time. And the more that people buy into it and the more that people come on along for the ride, I just think that it's an unstoppable force that is beginning to build steam and momentum. So I'm excited that we're on that front and we're working together, and there's a whole host of us acting in unison to bring others along for that journey, for that mission.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Harmonize at all?
Yeah, shoot. It's a little bit of a distraction from my day-to-day farming responsibilities. So I came from the software development space, and a large part of me is always kind of has my antenna out there searching for ways that software can maybe support, problems that I encounter daily. And, since taking over a farm, that's usually been in the farming context. However, for the first couple of years, I didn't want to try to force any software into the farm space just because it just didn't seem right. I feel like I wanted to distance myself as much as I could from tech. And, time kind of mounted and I was doing some things. And this is while I was out at Fox Point in the fields, like we were trying to track harvest records, or we were trying to keep records of our harvest volumes. And we were doing it with pen and paper, and these things were never getting transcribe back into the spreadsheet. In fact, that was my job. I never did it. Sorry, Sienna. I still have all the reference material if you want to transcribe it. But it just didn't seem like the best way to do it. So I was like, oh man, it would be cool if I could text myself this information, or if I could text this information to something, some service, and have it immediately be stored in a spreadsheet. It seemed like the most frictionless way to allow farmers and any other field workers, or pretty much anyone that wants to track data, but finds it being a headache to do so, seeming like the most frictionless way to do it. And as every engineer mind can say, what starts out as an estimate of 5 to 10 hour project turns into a 100-hour project, more. And it took me about 3 months to really get to a workable solution that covers all of the edge cases I saw coming up. And that's what Harmonize is. It's basically like a texting service that you can have data stored on your behalf. I was really curious just how far we could push some of the AI capabilities that we saw coming online and utilize them in a, I think, very viable use case, like in our line of work. And I saw the cell phone as being a really interesting like interface, because everyone's always has a phone. Sometimes they don't have Wi-Fi, so they can't use internet-enabled apps, but we usually have cell service. Cell service is like a pretty reliable telecommunication bit of infrastructure. So text messages are actually able to move where some, apps can't. So the text message seemed to be like really interesting interface. I got really into the whole designing of the service, got wrapped up in it. And yeah, I use it daily just to track my own harvests. I'd use it to track my crop plan, what I'm sowing on each bed, basically like what I planted, what I removed. And I've been doing it more and more for expenses. So I can now take a picture of an expense or of a receipt, and I can have that receipt automatically be filed away in my expenses. So I'm really just trying to see how can I offload as much of the work that requires me to be in front of a computer. How can I offload that to a text message that I don't have to think twice about after I initially send that text? It's ready. It was a real validating and like fun moment to have been selected for the CAF Innovation Challenge for the software category. That was a huge honor. And there's a lot of great companies that have been born out of that innovation challenge, like Grown By, and I think it's Bonsai Robotics that makes like Farm NG, some like rover technology, and a whole host of others. The category winners, just being connected to them in a little meeting prior to the award ceremony, they're some of the most innovative thinkers, and they're some of the most purposeful inventors I've met. They're doing these things because it's problems that they've come across in their line of work, and it's solutions that they just want to give to the community. And that alone was inspiring. It speaks to that whole network of change occurring in this space that we see in real time. So that was, it was a great honor. I would say I haven't been able to put as much time towards adding new features to Harmonize, just because, doing that on top of everything I just explained with where the Cardiff Tiny Farm's at the moment has been a little bit tough. But it's live, it's functional. People can go use it if they go to harmonize.one, O-N-E. That was the cheapest domain I could find. Kind of sounded cool too. It sounded real tech. But yeah, harmonize.one, you can sign up, and then immediately you'll be led through a quick onboarding flow, which will show you what the service is all about. It'll have you send a message. It'll show that message being stored into a spreadsheet, and then you kind of, really are just supposed to interact with it outside of that, just via your text messaging service of choice. There is that online platform to go look back at the history of the messages you sent, where it got stored. But that's more of just like on the back end, if you ever wanted to go and audit your past messages. Really, it's intended to keep farmers focused on what they're focused on a day-to-day basis, and to just interact with the service of their phone. I have some like hopes and dreams on where to take it, but I think I brought it as far as I can for the moment, until there's more indication that people want more from it. and that it actually has legs to stand on its own and become like business in earnest, then I might start putting more time and energy back into it. But right now, it's a great tool that I find being of use on a day-to-day basis myself. One other interesting feature is that you don't only have to send it messages with data that you want to store, it also can interpret questions on the information that you have stored. So I constantly am sending a text message asking like, how much kale do I have in storage? And it interprets that as, okay, let me go to this inventory spreadsheet because it sounds like an inventory question. Let me look for baby kale and let me see the unit measurements. Okay, you have 10 pounds in storage. And I just get a text back from me. So that's actually pretty cool. I think there's opportunities to build out some spreadsheet templates that I feel can be plug and play for farmers. Because I think a little bit of the hurdle in getting onboarded is understanding how Harmonize works with your existing systems. I think some people's spreadsheet systems might not conform super great to what Harmonize is attempting to look for. And if I were to offer some more templated, plug and play solutions, it could bring it to the next rung of usefulness. But I found that question when I first was testing it, and I got to ask like a question through text and I got the right answer back. I was like, oh crap, this is cool. This is going to be the biggest thing ever. But it actually is quite hard to get a service like this to being a profitable business. Because it takes a lot to run, to be honest. Like every message costs a bit of money, and there's free tiers, and on those free tiers you're kind of eating the expense, and then you wonder if people would ever want to convert to a paid member and if that is the model that you should follow. So there's a lot of complexities, not just in building the product, but in servicing it as its own standalone business that I'm having to grapple with. But as it stands today, it's something I'm really proud of, and it's something that I think represents the culmination of my time spent in farming and in tech. And I find it being like appropriate. I guess CAF was really emphasizing appropriate technologies, and that's a concept thrown out in permaculture design courses all around, where you don't have to eschew technology and become a Luddite and just like forcibly avoid the onset of new advancements in the world because you're so wanting to do it the way the old timers have done it, or like you want to do it without tools and technology. I guess there's like this element I find in a lot of farmers that want to just go back to an older way, which is cool. I respect that too. But appropriate technology says like, hey, you can choose good tools for the right purpose, and that is the middle ground. That's that like balance. And I think that's why I kind of named it Harmonize, was I feel like there's a balance there. But, we'll still see. It's been received with some pretty good feedback. However, I can't say that it's been like an outpouring of signups and usage. We see people using it daily for logging the eggs that their hens are producing. I've seen it for varieties of trees people are planting in their yard. I've seen people using it for bird watching. I'm using it for again, my accounting, it's more so my expense reporting, and my crop planning and my harvest logs. Those are the three things I'm using majority for. I could see it being used in some really interesting applications where we start crowdsourcing some of the like data capture that would lend itself to some really interesting insights. Like I would love to see a community of folks starting to use it whenever they go to a grocery store and they're just logging prices for certain vegetables at certain establishments, so we can have almost a long-term trending look at the price of produce in a given region for a given brand and start having that information to pull from that's community sourced. I would love to see it take that direction, but I don't know how it gets there, to be honest. So we'll see. Maybe this podcast blows it up.
You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes for anyone who is curious or wants to try it out. I like that idea of kind of like a communal way that we're logging the different prices that are reflected at different stores and different brands, because I feel like I'm always like, I'm taking note of it mentally, but I actually never really write it down, and then I do forget. But you kind of just start to do that when you're growing and selling food. You notice, you're like, okay, how much is this sold for in this location or this location, and how does that differ? And I think it'd be really cool to have
I would love to see
a
go that
source
direction.
like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be such an interesting community tool that we can all reference. You know, keep some transparency in the space, and keep ourselves like not undervaluing the things that we're producing. I think there's a really interesting tendency on my own to like underprice things just for the sake of wanting to make it accessible or for making me like avoid the no. That is a hard thing for myself, is really standing firm on the value that I believe we're producing. So long as it's, you know, on solid ground. I don't want to sell a tomato for $15, but it's like, no, this is $5 a pound, or this is $6 a pound. And I feel confident saying that because I can point to 3 places right now that are selling this for $5.50. And I'm choosing like, this grew 100 feet from you and it's delicious because I had one and I'm saying it's $6. In other cases, you know, like I think you can keep some grocery stores accountable and being like, okay, that seems a little high for that. Like I sell it at 3 and I feel confident that that is the right value. Anyway, it's like, it brings about some interesting discussions as opposed to people just seeing a boutique farm stand on the side of the road, or an elevated market and just automatically assuming that the prices are ridiculous just because they walk into the store and just feel that way. I would love to get some validation around it. Like, actually, Vaughn sells this for the same. Like, actually, we sell it less than Vaughn's. Actually, yeah, it's like all these things. I would love to have something physical to point to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be cool. And having that as like open source information.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah,
be
data
really
capture. Data capture is really, really fascinating. We can go on a whole nother rant there. I'll hold myself back. But I will say, I purposely built Harmonize to work with Google Sheets specifically because I find Google Sheets is this universally understood and used application that has so much capacity that is hardly being utilized at the moment. And there's some work for me to like really flesh that idea out and hopefully bring some solutions forward. But I love Google Sheets. And that's like a hot take for a software developer because everyone loves the new fancy database tools, but I'm like, Google Sheets is the best.
Yeah, I love Google Sheets because it's so easy. I don't speak spreadsheet very well, so
yeah, I mean it is.
It's
like it's a approachable spreadsheet. But thanks for that's how bad of a marketer I am. Is I didn't even think about Harmonize, so thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean it's a cool app and it's been recognized very well. I think you should talk about it more.
Appreciate that. Try to carve out a little bit more time to do so. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can reach out on my Instagram, CardiffTinyFarm.com or Cardiff Tiny Farm, or like just hit me up. I'm sure we'll have some contact information below.
Yeah. Well, as we just start to wrap up our conversation today, is there anything else that you would like to speak to that we didn't speak to, or is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with today?
I guess I'll just leave it on this note because I think it speaks again to the heart of what we're doing here. The farm has been a real teacher of mine, and the biggest thing it's probably taught me is if I want to go out and change the world, a pretty darn good way to go do that is find a small bit of land or a small community or a small space and make it as beautiful as you can. And in doing that, by devoting yourself to that aim, it has ripple effects, as we spoke about earlier in the conversation. So if you're struggling with finding purpose or meaning, like, go figure out where you want to go create beauty. And it doesn't have to be a farm. It doesn't have to be a physical space. You can see maybe your farm is your family. Maybe your farm that you envision is your tight-knit group of friends. Maybe it's your church community. Maybe it is your front yard. But making things beautiful for the sake of beauty alone, it's magic. And I get like kind of tingles thinking about it because it really brings forward a lot of the reasons why I've chose this direction for my life, despite how hard it is. Bringing beauty will never fail you, like in any way. You might not have as much, but you'll always have that space that you can call your own and didn't have people enjoy, and I think it's just the best use of time that I could recommend.
Yeah, well, that was beautifully said. And it's true. I mean, the space is, I mean, it's physically beautiful also. If anyone's listening and they didn't know of the Cardiff Tiny Farm, or, well, if you're local to San Diego, but if you haven't been to the Cardiff Tiny Farm, you should definitely visit because it's such a beautiful space. And I think the intention that you really put into it and the level of integrity that you've held throughout growing it, it really comes through. But it's, I mean, every time I'm there, I'm always like, gosh, this space is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Which can
Thank
also be easy. I mean, I will say, like, when you're in farming in some capacity and you go to somebody else's space, it's so much easier to see just all of the beauty. And when you're the one tending to a space, you're just like, oh my God.
You see all the flaws. You see, like, I
Yeah.
gotta tend to that bed. That thing's got gopher holes on it.
Yes, you're
I
like,
laugh
that should
this
have been
place.
flipped 2 weeks ago. And it's, you're just like, it can be hard to see, but just to reflect back to you, it is beautiful.
Beauty doesn't have to be expensive. In fact, just to like put a little bit of a caveat to that beauty idea, it's a feeling. It's like the reasons you're putting forward something is where that beauty really does reside. Like the aesthetics come out through the intention, because we're rustic. I mean, this is like,
Yeah.
it's beautiful, but it's not highly capitalized. So I can't do that much, but I can do just enough. I can do what I can, and I can like maintain it in a way that I find beauty in. And I think that it resonates with others because people see it for what it is. It's like, this is something that someone's poured their heart into. Maybe that's at the essence of beauty that I mean. It's a pouring out of oneself for the purpose of sharing something someone's proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's how I would define beauty. But you're right. I mean, it is, I do see all the flaws. I was like, oh man, I got to get to that project. That needs to be upkept a little bit. That needs to be fixed, all these things. But it is so nice to get new eyes on the space and to have friends out here and enjoy it, because it does remind you, like, wow, this is special. It removes all of that, to-do list mentality and just drops you into being like, yes, I wouldn't have any other way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast again today and just sharing more about yourself and your journey and sharing your time with all of us.
Thank you for what you're doing. I know we've kind of chatted about it offline, but I think this is beautiful, what you're creating and the spaces you're allowing for farmers to tell their stories, where they otherwise probably wouldn't have the ability to do so, or at least have it distributed in the way that it's distributed through this kind of medium. So you're doing beautiful work. I appreciate everything you're engaged in, podcast and otherwise. You're a real treasure to this community of ours.